I'm Andy Gatherer, and I was a marine engineer and mechanic, or stoker, on board HMS Glamorgan in 1982 during the Falklands War. It felt very surreal to think that we were going to go to war. I didn't join the Navy to go to war, I joined the Navy to go around the world. Morning of the 12th of June, we'd been on the gun line supporting 4-5 Commando on Two Sisters. We'd stayed a lot later than we really should have, but we needed to make sure it was worth the risk. We needed to make sure that the 4-5 could get to the top of Two Sisters. They called in for gunfire support again. As I said, my friend, when I've spoken to him since about it, who was there, said it was well worth what we did. We just were travelling away at speed. The gun crews had come out of the gun turret, so they were helping us as well, but the door was open. I seem to remember sort of 6:35, around then, 5 or 10 minutes after I'd been up there, felt the ship start to lean over. We started to turn a corner, which was quite strange because we were usually going in straight lines, but we'd start to feel. And then I was looking aft as I was kicking these shells off, and then just the ship started to move, and then either the bang and the flash, and then this red, white and green, which is the gun crews and the Seacat crews to close up. And then the ship, like a whoomp, and then the whole thing, sort of just a boom and a big flash of light. And if I'd have been facing forward, I don't think I'd have seen it. I remember seeing it vividly. And then the action station's alarm went off again, and we went back down below, got dressed into our Fearnought suits, and then was sent to the midship section base, they were deploying all the people. They were in charge of the incident. It was in their area. As two of us were sent up in our Fearnought suits, got to the midship section base. So this must have been 10-15 minutes after it had gone off, and were told to go to the hangar, follow the hoses, go to the hangar. So we followed the hoses that were run out, got to the hangar. The hangar was there was a hole, a huge hole to the left hand. Luckily we'd followed the hoses. If we'd have run round the corner, we'd have ended up in the hole and down into the galley, which was beneath it, on fire. We got round, followed the hoses round. There were people on the end of the hoses, but weren't dressed in Fearnought. They were dressed in the normal working dress. So we sort of took the hoses from them, and they backed us up, and we then moved into the hangar. There had been attempts to get closer into the hangar, in behind what was left of the helicopter, because the helicopter had completely been blown apart. There was ammunition cooking off. There was high pressure air cylinders in the corner that could have exploded. There was just a lot of noise. There was a lot of debris everywhere. There was smoke, flame. We walked straight into this. We got to the end of the hose where the guys were at, and there was no nozzle on the end of the hose. They couldn't find a nozzle for some reason, so we were sort of advancing by bending the hose over and making it spray water. It's really, really surreal, because your training says you've got to wait for this nozzle, but off we went, and we were directing in them. We were heading to try and beat the fire back down to us, and there was a hangar office over the back end. We then had to climb in and over these dead bodies. There was 3 or 4, maybe 5 people in there lying on the floor, and we were trying to get into the hangar office, and up above the hangar was an area where they kept all the documentation, which was burning quite heavily. We got beaten back a couple of times, and then I remember a torch being shone at me and somebody trying to get my attention, and it was a person the lieutenant who'd come around and seen what had gone on and noticed that someone was moving. We'd stood on somebody who then screamed, and we didn't realise he was actually alive still. He'd survived the initial onslaught by being buried by his mates, effectively, but he'd had his legs broken, or one of his legs broken. And we stepped on him, and of course he screamed. So we then sort of stopped what we were doing. Lieutenant Harcastle came round the corner, and when we then had to get him out, we pulled him out and they administered morphine and got him to the first aid thing. And I remember seeing the captain come past with a really ashen face, Captain Barrow. I remember him coming down to deck and walking down and looking at him and thinking, he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, you know. And there we were just doing our job, but I really saw it in him. But anyway, we carried on. Eventually we managed to get the fires out. They were extinguished. We were still having problems with the hangar office. The paperwork was still burning or smouldering, so we couldn't seem to get a hose up, because you have to go up a vertical ladder, lift a hatch, and then get the hose in, and it was all too much for one person to try and do everything. So we eventually ended up on the hangar roof. There was a Royal Marine up there, a guy called Tiny, who we gave a sledgehammer to, and one of the holes in the roof had petalled inwards. So I don't understand how it petalled in, or the way it was said. We said, Tiny, can you beat a big hole so we can get a nozzle into there? Because you couldn't get a nozzle in. You could get water in, but you couldn't get the nozzle in. You needed the nozzle to be on spray so you could sort of cool the compartment down. So we got him to beat this hole, and we then stuck this hose in till it stopped. And that then that seems to I don't seem to remember what happened after that. I think we got back down to the section bases and we returned to our own because the fires were extinguished, and then the sort of clear up. And I don't really remember much about the clear up. I just remember it all happening. We were all sort of just a bit dazed, a bit shocked, I suppose, and got on and done everything we needed to do, and then had the time to reflect. And you think sometimes, if anybody been a bit quicker, would we have been able to save these people? But, again, your mind runs through over and over again. We weren't the first people there, but backing these people up who were the first people into that. I wonder if we could got there quicker, could we have done anything more? But, it is what it is, unfortunately. And, that rides through your mind occasionally. Yeah, excuse me. Sorry. That evening, about 7:30 in the evening, we all mustered on the flight deck, and the bodies were laid out on the quarterdeck, so quite low to the ship, and we carried out a burial at sea. It was pretty awful at the time, but it seemed when we went up to the upper deck, sun came out, sea went calm, we buried our dead, sun went in, sea got rough again. No real rhyme or reason for it, but that's what happened. And but burying them was hard work as well. So the guys whose messmates they were, I had to put these guys into these, volunteer to put these guys into canvas, and then we carried out a proper burial at sea, which is hard, especially when it's people you've been so close to. And we were we were very close to the end of it. 12th of June, they surrendered on the 14th. We nearly made it, and then we didn't. Looking back 40 years, would I do it again? Yes. You would? Yes, of course I would. We were the only ship to survive an Exocet attack from the Falklands. So yeah, immensely proud.